with Hayes, Noodles, and the O-Dog on TSN 1050.
Oh, yes, guy. Mail it in Friday, hour number 3. Jim Tatti Dave Feschuk. Hazy B will be back on Monday. OverDrive is brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Coming up very shortly, Dave Sims, the Seattle Mariners TV voice. Later on, Rod Smith, CFL on TSN play-by-play voice live from Hamilton, the Tim Hortons play-by-play booth, as the Ticats get set to take on the Argos. Let's deal with the Mariners, who are in the wild card race, 5.5 out, but a bunch of teams in front of them, including 2 in their own division. That's their plight right now, but the numbers are there. Dave Sims is here, Seattle Mariners TV voice. Dave, welcome. How are you today, sir?
Doing well. Just get to the ballpark and ready to rock and roll, boys. How you guys doing?
Oh, very good, thanks. So you sound like you're up. I mean, you've got a long night ahead of you, but you've already had the coffee, right?
Hey, man, I get paid to call baseball games. What's there to be down about?
Well said. Teoscar Hernandez, first year with the Mariners. What have you made of what he's done so far?
I love the guy. Personally, love him. And he had a good June. Had a big day yesterday. His defense, people kept telling me that he was, maybe just short of a butcher on defense. I don't see that to be the case. And he's been a very positive influence on the ball club.
So, Dave, there's always a lot of talk and a lot of hype about Toronto Blue Jays road trips to Seattle because the West Coast Canadian fans love to come down in their car caravans to Seattle and invade your ballpark. What's your level of concern that the infiltrators turn it into a bit of a quasi Blue Jays home game?
It doesn't bother me. It tickles me, and I like it. I love their verve. I love their enthusiasm. I mean, I passed, I live a short distance from the ballpark, and driving en route, saw a lot of Blue Jay, folks wearing the merch and everything. I think it's great. It's going to bring a big atmosphere. It always does, and especially since the Blue Jays just got hot, and we're trying to get something going here. It's a big game. It's a big series, and I think it doesn't bother me. But it does remind me of the great line by Casey Candelli. Remember him? He played with Montreal. He's a utility player in his years, and he was first base coach with us a few years ago. And
right.
One year, man, I'm telling you, it seemed like there was 45,000 Canadian fans in here. He said, "Hey, Skip, do we have to wear gray today?"
That's pretty funny. But I was going to ask you, there was a bit of a controversy, at least it certainly resonated in Toronto, that the Mariners decided to take the Blue Jays gear out of their team shop. What did you make of that?
I didn't know it was in there until I saw Paul Sewald, our closer, saying, "What the hell is this?" J.P. Crawford had put up an emoji with a shaking my head, a SMH next to it. So, I understand. I'm as big a capitalist as anybody. Yeah. Probably maybe not one that might not have been the move you really wanted to make.
Right.
Not to mention that when your fans come here, they already are wearing their gear. I mean, come on, you can see the blue for miles around. We don't really need to be selling that stuff. I mean, come on.
You're watching all those Blue Jays fans walk up to the ballpark. Did you hit the horn?
No, not yet. No, but I was, if I was in a mood or if I had a bad time driving down here, it'd have been a mood. Maybe it'd have been worse. Well, I'm a New York guy, New York Philly guy, so I sort of put that on. I put it in my pocket, didn't sweat it.
Let's talk about the Mariners. As I said in the intro, they're 5.5 out of the wild card race. Just a bunch of teams in front of them, including 2 in their own division. What do you make of your team so far?
Well, we're pitching like crazy. Starting pitching, they had a couple hiccups, but not many. Bullpen's been very solid. Our problem is they don't freaking hit. I mean, they're among the worst hitting teams in the game. And, we've been hovering 2 games above 500, 2 games below. It's been a march up, march backwards. And Dan Gladden and the Twins, they were just in here, and he said, "Man, you guys have a good team. What the heck is going on?" And it's so true when you look at, the back of the baseball cards of a bunch of our guys. They're just not hitting their norms. And, last year we made a run, as you know, we won 14 in a row, got us back in the race, and took off from there, came up and, upset you guys at your place. So, nobody's talking about winning 14 games in a row, but they'd like to, 5 or 6 or 7, stretches where they won a bunch of series. So I think that's priority number one.
So, Dave, you guys in Seattle had the privilege of hosting the All-Star festivities. one of the things I learned in that particular weekend was that, or the few days, was that Shohei Ohtani had a lot of nice things to say about Seattle, and including the fact that he spent some off-season time in your fair city. Hey, was that news to you that Shohei had been an off-season presence in Seattle, and what are people making of it with Ohtani being sort of the hot topic in baseball between now and the trade deadline?
Well, the fact that you heard people chanting, "Come to Seattle," I think that tells you all you need to know. And, yeah, I understand he was at Driveline working on his game, working on some things. I wasn't aware of that. He kept that pretty much, undercover. We do have a terrific Japanese-American and Asian influence in this area. That would be wonderful. And we actually thought, back when he was coming over, I know Jerry Dipoto, I remember he told the president of baseball operations that he went to bed that night thinking he had him. And they got a call in the middle of the night, said, no, that's not going to work. But he would be an unbelievable fit here. Julio, Jared Kelnick. I'm hoping that Teo re-ups. I hope they're able to sign him up. I think most of the studs that we have are pitchers in our system. We don't have that many bats, at least not ready for another 3 years. So having his dual threat would be just off the chart here in Seattle. That holds for anybody wherever he goes.
Yeah, no doubt. You mentioned Jared's name, kick the water cooler. Obviously, an overly emotional response. And how do they replace his bat?
Well, yeah, I'm curious to see if there's going to be a move made. But a young kid named Caden Marlowe was having a good run in AAA. AJ Pollock will probably get more playing time. AJ's a right-hand hitter, and Marlowe's a left-hand hitter. I got to tell you, yesterday I was sitting one person over from Kelnick when he came into the dugout, and I give him a lot of credit. He manned up. He said, "Hey, I'm accountable. It's my fault. I hurt the team. It'll never happen again." And he did this after he composed himself. And I tell you what, there might have been, 10 or 15 of us. You might have seen the pictures and the video on Twitter. I wanted to shrink away and I'd let the kid have his own moment. I mean, I almost could have done without the interview, but he showed me a lot. He really did. And I think we all have moments like that in life where it's like, hey, you got to buckle up here, pal, and here's the right thing to do it. Let's get after it and do that.
What do you make of the situation, the Mariners find themselves in heading into the trade deadline? We were just talking with one of our Blue Jay reporters here about how there's now with the third wild card spot, it brings a lot more teams into the conversation that think they may have a chance, but it also maybe creates teams or creates situations where teams maybe reach when they shouldn't reach, if you know what I mean, and maybe make moves when they think they're contenders and they're not. Where do you think the Mariners fit in on that kind of spectrum?
Hey, after the taste we had last year, getting into the playoffs, beating Toronto in Toronto, and taking Houston to the wall, it proves once again, if you can just get in, anything can happen. And our pitching is such that, good pitching generally stops good hitting, especially in playoff baseball. You're not going to get a bunch of 8-7 games. And I think all those games we had with Houston last year, heck, the games we had with you guys, all, nail biters. So it's a matter of just get the hell in there and you go from there. And I think, and again, the fact that, last year was the first time in 21 years the Mariners have made the playoffs. We want more of that.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt. No doubt. There was a lot of talk in Toronto that, the home run derby, the All-Star experience would be a springboard for Vlad Guerrero Jr. into the second half. He, of course, won the home run derby, and it hasn't really worked out that way for him. He hasn't been particularly hot coming out of the break. What's it been like for your team? Was there anticipation that the All-Star festivities would be a good or a bad thing for the Mariners, and what have you seen?
Well, I don't know that, the All-Star festivities had anything to do with the team. I mean, the team, it came out of the gate slowly. I don't know, that might have had a little bit of a factor. I mean, we had an embarrassing loss last Saturday to Detroit. It was about as listless as I've ever seen a big league team. They come back and won the Sunday game, and then they split 4 with Minnesota. Regarding the home run derby, I've seen, guys who have won it, continue onward and upward from there. And I've seen guys, remember Bobby Abreu with the Phillies one year, won it, and then he had a miserable next 4 or 5 weeks.
Right.
Julio Rodriguez had a great, he had 41 home runs in that first round. I've never seen a dude so exhausted in a baseball situation. And that home run derby certainly was made for him, but he's still swinging like he's in the derby, and I think they've been working on it to have him control the swing a little bit more strong as anybody in the game. And I don't really think I always say, you don't have to hit it to Jupiter, just hit it to Mars. And I think that might have had a little bit of effect on Julio. He was swinging hard even before the All-Star break. So we'll see. I mean, the whole experience of having the baseball world here was spectacular. Best time of the year to be here. The weather is perfect. Maybe San Diego's the only place in the lower 48 that has better weather at this time. And the city cleaned itself up, and I think our organization did a wonderful job hosting everybody. So we're pretty proud of it.
Dave, you're getting set for a weekend with the Jays. So you've done your prep work because you're on your way to the ballpark. What do you think of the Blue Jays?
I like their talent, and I saw that I was looking at numbers this morning. I hit 287 on this last they're 4-2 out of the gate. I'm curious to see what their bullpen looks like. I know what Gosman has. Kikuchi, last outing was not very good. He shut us out when we saw him up at your place. So we'll see. The fact that he's going to catch a little bit of a break, having a whole bunch of your fans here, because he might really. I would think he might hear it here if this was a full-on Mariner crowd. But that remains to be seen. But you got some dynamic personalities up there. I love Bichette and Vladdy Jr., Springer. I mean, you guys got players, and I think that they're going to have a hand in what happens in the playoffs. I mean, the Yankees are fading. I just heard a few hours ago, Trevino was playing with the broken wrist. Now he's done for the season, the Yankee catcher. So their problems continue to mount. Judge is supposed to take batting practice on Sunday. So there's no guarantee what they're going to do. And even if Judge comes back and hits 1 million home runs, that's not going to produce a whole lot of wins for them. They're not very good. You got to be concerned about Baltimore. I mean, Baltimore, since they left us, I want to say just after the All-Star break last year, they must be playing. It feels like they're playing about 700 ball. I mean, they're really good. Now, a lot of young players are there. Everybody's answering the bell up there, over in Baltimore. So you guys are going to be right there. I don't know if Boston has a run. I don't think the Yankees have a run. And Tampa Bay's trying to regroup right now. So you guys have a shot to maybe win a division.
Well, on that note, Dave, thanks very much. Really appreciate your time.
Anytime, fellas. Good to talk to you. Thanks for the invitation. Be well.
Thank you. You too. That's Dave Sims, Seattle Mariners TV voice. I like how he mapped that out. Baltimore is just everything's turning to gold.
Yeah, and I don't think many people saw that coming. Quite that way.
I think you were trying to figure out if it was legitimate, and it just keeps getting better.
Yeah, as Keegan says, their farm system appears to be impeccable. They continue to bring up A1 prospects that produce in ways that you can only dream of, and that's hard to contend with.
And his description of the Yankees sort of not really disintegrating, but hurting. I mean, in the past, when the Yankees were like that, that's when they would pull an Ohtani-like trade, or it sort of sets the table, doesn't it?
You do worry about that if you're the Blue Jays, that their limping Yankees at a moment of weakness are going to assert their strength, right? As much as they haven't been able to hit without Judge. We saw Rodon the other night in Anaheim blowing kisses to the Yankee fans, sarcastically and erroneously, as he acknowledged later. Not a good idea to go against the Bronx faithful, even if you're on the road. But, yeah, let's not underestimate the evil empire, and let's not underestimate the attraction of playing in New York. I mean, we don't know what's on Ohtani's mind. Obviously, when he first had his choice to come to Major League Baseball, he chose the West Coast. As Dave pointed out, Seattle had a great shot because of the Ichiro connection, and because Ichiro is such a powerful figure in Japanese baseball. Ohtani was obviously thinking about Seattle, ended up in Anaheim. But, that New York, that Yankee cap's famous all over the world for a reason, and you have to believe they could be factors here.
I just think it's, there's the baseball side of the deal, which is stupendous because I don't know what kind of a number he's going to come up with, but it's an unheard of number.
Yeah.
And then there's the money that can be made outside of baseball because he's a world figure.
Yeah, and I guess his agent might say he can make that anywhere because he's that good, and where no matter where he plays, there'll be Japanese people tuning in. There will be Japanese ad dollars to be had. He's going to get his Japanese endorsement deals no matter what happens because he's the biggest thing that's ever come out of Japan that swings a bat and throws a ball. So maybe it doesn't matter where he plays, but you got to believe that it probably doesn't hurt if he plays in either L.A. or New York.
L.A., New York, Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah, just because those are the power cities.
Right. And especially if you can win in one of those places. He talked at the All-Star break about how he's getting tired of losing. He doesn't want to turn into the next Mike Trout and have a wonderful career in which he plays a very small handful of playoff games. And, of course, they're not going to the playoffs this year unless there's some kind of a miracle renaissance. They're 5 games back at the third wild card. It's not impossible, but it's not likely.
Yeah.
So who knows? But it's I tell you, man, Dave was right about or maybe it was Keegan that was talking about how baseball can use a little bit off-field drama a la the NBA. Stars changing teams, stars having drama. There's not a lot of that in baseball, but this is as close as you're going to get. And the trade deadline plus the free agency it should be pretty juicy stuff.
Yeah, he just twigged something that it's almost an unrelated question, but because of the NBA player movement, which I like, and that mid-season tournament that's going to happen this year, I sort of get the impression that a lot of people, and you and I were raised on the regular season, we all understand. You and I would understand the value of it and how it's a constant build.
Yeah.
Some people don't like it because it's long and tedious. Well, it's not ever going to be shorter. But is there a valid reason for in-season tournaments in all of pro sports? You know what?
Now that the NBA is doing it, you have to believe they'll be looking at it. And I know Bill Daly in the NHL has kind of thrown the whole suggestion, immediately out the window. But how can you not try and add some sort of a punch to a really kind of tedious 6 months, right? Like it's a tedious 6 months. And then, of course, it's been in the NBA more extremely, it's been made irrelevant by the fact that the players generally try to limit their exposure to it in the load management era.
Load management.
Where guys playing 82 games is no longer seen as some sort of badge of honor. In fact, it's sort of, many people would tell you you're not being smart because nobody cares that you played 82 games. They only care what you did in the playoffs. And, Kawhi Leonard famously said, these are just 82 practices before we start the real ones.
Yeah, well, and that was true.
Yeah.
And I've always said that the NBA, you should always listen to what the NBA does because they sort of lead the way.
Yeah.
To me, it's the best league. And their play-in tournament I think it's just marvelous. It takes all the sting out of the tank. Obviously the lottery does that in its own way, but you go back to the NHL at the trade deadline where everybody's all the teams that still have a mathematical shot really understand, even though they're 4 points out, they don't.
Yeah, it's tough.
And so they liquidate for draft picks.
Yeah.
But having said that, if there was a play-in tournament, then they couldn't do that.
Yeah, no, there's something to be said for that. I mean, there's something to be said for a play-in tournament, and then this whole idea of the in-season tournament, just to have a big event in the middle of the season that's not the All-Star game. I mean, the All-Star games have had...
And the All-Star game, to some people, is a big event. To me, it's not.
Well, it's losing relevance.
It's a corporate break.
Right. And it's lost relevance. And look, the NBA still does it okay. I think the NHL's had a hard time keeping up. And the idea that you have an in-season tournament now, today it may not have resonance, but it takes time to build these things, right? And if you don't start building them now, you won't have them in 20 years, right?
Yeah. So, I just think that if there's something that can break the monotony, then why not? I mean, if the players sign off on it. So if the NBA players want this to happen, there's got to be some merit to it.
Well, it's like it's not unusual. Obviously, we have the European model, and they have their cups and their various shields and all the rest of it, and they've got trophies coming out the wazoo for their teams, right? And they value the regular season too. When you win the Premier League, it means you won the regular season, right?
Well, I mean, it's an add-on. I mean, it's not you're not doing this for charity purposes,
right?
There's more money to be made,
right? And that's the thing. But in college sports, they've got college basketball goes to the Maui Invitational, and they play a little 4-team tournament, and somebody gets a trophy at the end of it. It's not like no one's saying it's the same as a national championship, but it's something to kind of distract you and keep you going in the early season. Like, why not have something like that? Like, what's wrong with that? If it can make a few more regular season games a little more meaningful with a little more of a storyline, and then you add some cash prizes for the players, and whether or not the cash will mean anything, we'll find out. But there's going to be cash on the line.
Well, it's just part of it. I mean, you can't mandate. You can't just walk up to the players and say, "Oh, by the way, we're just throwing this tournament in."
Right.
Revenue has to be shared.
Yeah, but it's essentially just a way to make the regular season games mean a little more. Right?
Yeah, I don't think, obviously, I'm not going to say the money doesn't matter because it does, but
It always matters.
I think it's the monotony that's the start, sort of the ground level presentation is let's break the monotony and here's what comes with it.
Right. Exactly. And I think players, they've grown up. When you play on the GTHL Toronto Marlies, you go to tournaments all the time, right? You play a weekend tournament. Like, tournament culture is a big part of sports. It just hasn't been a part of pro sports.
Well, and if you want to attract new or younger fans who aren't raised on the monotony of regular season, that's the way to go.
Yeah, I agree. And bottom line is, you're essentially making what is meaningless, because a lot of these games are pretty much meaningless, a little more meaningful.
Coming up at the bottom of the hour, Rod Smith live from Tim Hortons Field in Hamilton, where the Cats are getting set to host the Argonauts. Mail It In Friday is brought to you by Boston Pizza. Weekends are better with fish bowls and frosty pints at the BP patio. Grab your sunscreen and let's have a weekend. See you on the BP patio. This is OverDrive on TSN 1050, streaming online, also available on the iHeartRadio app.
Back to OverDrive with Hayes, Noodles, and the O-Dog.
Oh, yeah, that's gliding music. Mail It In Friday. Jim Tatti Dave Feschuk with you. Hazy B back on Monday. And everything in its normal spot, I guess, next week as the summer grinds on. The dog days of summer, right?
Yeah, which means the O-Dog days are quite far away.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Still plenty of time.
He's still out on the course.
And if you're waiting for the arbitration ruling, it's not going to happen anytime soon.
But it's got to happen before Sunday.
That's right. 48 hours.
The dude's got 48 hours to make it official.
How'd you like to go through all that paperwork?
Sounds like there's a lot of paperwork. These guys present very thorough cases with very, extensive comparables. So, yeah, there's a lot of studying to do if you're the arbitrator.
Yeah, especially on the players' side. But nonetheless, we move on. Tiger Cats and Argonauts live from Tim Hortons Field, CFL on TSN tonight. Rod Smith is in the booth in Hamilton. Rod, how are you today, sir?
Jimmer, Dave, good to talk to you guys again. It's been a while. I'm doing great, thank you.
Well, this game is probably a no-brainer pick. I mean, I could go through the negative side of it. Powell's starting first game for the Ticats, and the Argos are 4-0, but it is the CFL. Can you give us a scenario where there's an upset?
Well, I'll tell you what. There was a no-brainer last night in Winnipeg, too, wasn't it? And at halftime, I was shocked to see how the Elks were hanging around. And I think the Ticats are obviously a better team than the Elks right now. They beat them last week in Edmonton. You're right. If it wasn't for the difference at quarterback, I would not be surprised to see this a much closer game than in week 2 for the Argos season opener when I beat them at, I think, 32-14. So, but I still wonder, though, Jim, about Taylor Powell, who just showed me enough to intrigue me. A small sample size. He only had 4 passes in Edmonton, the first one for a touchdown. But he was, he came into the game with a sizable lead and helped add to it. And just 2 for 4. So we still haven't seen enough. But last week, we knew so little about Dustin Crum, who 2 weeks ago here had come off the bench for Jeremiah Masoli and made an impression with his running. And then last week, an amazing comeback by the Red Blacks over Winnipeg. So you're right. In the CFL, you never know. Logic says Argos, but you still don't know.
Well, Rod, FanDuel will tell you it's Argos minus 9.5.
Oh,
so considerable underdogs for the Ticats. But, yeah, let's expand on the Taylor Powell story here. Obviously, a rookie QB here. We know all about the CFL quarterback crisis. Our good colleague Dave Naylor has gone through that, about how so many teams have been hit by either injuries or departures to make, finding good quarterbacks in this league very difficult. What do you make of Powell, and what do you make, in the wider sense, what do you make of the CFL's current situation with quarterbacks and how it's been tough to find them if you don't have one?
Well, you can't sugarcoat it, Dave. It's a cloud. So I'll choose the optimistic side. Now with the silver lining, you get to see some people you wouldn't otherwise see. But you're right. It's certainly a concern when you have so many going down. If you look at the Ticats against the Argos, going back to Labor Day, or actually just a couple of games before that. They played them a lot leading up to Labor Day, but they've had, in their last 5 games against Toronto, 5 different starting quarterbacks if you count Bo Levi Mitchell and now Taylor Powell. Matthew Schultz isn't facing this season, but he did last year. And then you had in Dane Evans before and a guy by the name of Jamie Newman who had a cup of coffee, and he started the game on Labor Day. So, yeah, that it's certainly been an issue for Hamilton. We see it's been a big issue for the Ottawa Redblacks, too. And, yeah, they've got to bring in more quarterbacks. They have to find more quarterback talent. But when you see something happen like last week, at least it offers hope that, there's a silver lining here, that we could see some talented quarterbacks who need to be given a chance and see what they can do. The sample size is so small, as mentioned with Taylor Powell, but there's something about him that I like, and it's less tangible. It's kind of a confidence that the moment doesn't seem too big for him. And that's something, instead of deer in the headlights, and I don't expect to see that from him. I don't know how well it's going to go. I don't even think he knows, but he does seem to be quietly calm and confident about the situation that he's in right now, and I think that's vital for a pro football quarterback.
I think it's great you could say that about a guy, basically the number 3, because both starters are out. So let me ask you, as you're doing your research for this game, what have they said about Bo Levi Mitchell, and when can he come off that injury list?
It's interesting, Jim. We were watching him just on the field earlier, and he looks pretty good. It's hard to say when he'd be ready to go, but I am thinking, and this is without hearing anything official from the Tiger Cat, there's speculation building that it could be any week that he would be ready to go again. So, and they certainly need that. He was the big name they were hanging a lot of their hopes on coming in from Calgary in a year that they're hosting the Grey Cup again, and it's been disappointing. And if they could get, certainly a veteran presence, especially if Bo Levi Mitchell can return to the form that he had before a string of injuries, even his last couple of years in Calgary. But he looked good out there warming up. For all it's worth, not quite ready to strap the pads on yet. But, hopefully for the Ticats, it'll be sooner rather than later. We'll see what Taylor Powell can do in the meantime.
So on a more positive quarterbacking story, Rod, obviously Chad Kelly, the Argos starting QB, has had some pretty good results, including, 21 for 25 for 351 yards and 3 TDs in last week's win over the Alouettes. What do you make of Kelly? Is this sustainable? Is this something that is going to flatline, or not flatline, but is he due to come back to earth, or can you see this guy being exactly as he's been for the long haul here?
I think he's the real deal, and I got to admit, Dave, I had my doubts heading into the season. Not so much doubts, but just uncertainty. Like, was that appearance in the Grey Cup and a meaningless game at the end of the regular season enough to anoint him as one of the next great quarterbacks in the CFL? I think he got a lot of confidence after McLeod Bethel Thompson got hurt in the Grey Cup last November, doing what he did when he came off the bench. He also has, with more of a track record than Taylor Powell, that same kind of confidence where the moment doesn't seem too big. He's swags the nickname, cocky, if you will, but a very confident guy, and he's been backing it up so far this year. And the reason why I think he is the real deal, it's not just his ability, it's the supporting cast. I like their offensive line. In 4 games, they've taken only 4 sacks, and 1 a game is easily the best right now in the Canadian Football League. He's been getting protection. He's got time. He's got a great running game. When you think that Andrew Harris running the football is now the number 2 option behind A.J. Ouellette, that tells you something. Even though Harris is getting on in years, they run the football better than any team in the league right now, and that's going to take pressure off a quarterback. And he's made some throws. I thought that was such a good finish in an entertaining game in Montreal last week when the Alouettes, credit them for coming back and constantly making it interesting. But that final drive where Kelly rolled out to the left and he found David Unger wide open in the end zone, that showed a lot of poise. And that was a close game. But you're right, those stats, 84% efficiency. And next to Zach Collaros, I think, in terms of the quarterback efficiency stat, he's right there. They're 1-2. And I would think 1-2 in the race for MOP, early as it is in the CFL season now in Week 7. But I like his poise. I like his confidence. And I like the supporting cast that he has on that offense.
Well, if you want to find a team that's full value for a 4-0 record, it's the Argos. Offensively, defensively, running, passing. It's all there. There's really no Grey Cup hangover there, is there?
No, there isn't. And that's interesting, too. we go way back covering this league, Jim, and we've seen the Argos especially. I used to think they at times could be a great team that couldn't stand prosperity, especially after they'd win a Grey Cup. They weren't bad in 2013 after winning in 12. They were bad in 2018, winning in 2017, and even then they had mediocre records and they just got hot at the right time. But I've seen this team historically after having a run of success, then having a run of failure afterwards, and there has not been, and I don't know if this speaks well for Ryan Dinwiddie, but he didn't want let up, obviously, and there hasn't been one so far. And still a good part of the core of that team is still there. The big change at quarterback, yes, but Kelly was there. He was a part of what happened last fall, and they have some talent, but they seem to be more grounded than I've seen past Argo champions, coming into the next season where they just couldn't sustain it. This team so far has, and right now you can't dispute they're the number one team in the Canadian Football League.
So you made reference, Rod, to last night's game in Winnipeg where it was 6-6 at halftime, and the Elks looked like, hey, there's a chance we could get our first win. Ultimately, of course, they did not get their first win. They lose 28-14 to the Blue Bombers, and it's 0-7. And I guess the positive spin is, hey, at least they didn't lose at home, right, Rod? I mean, after losing the 20 straight to tie the North American home losing streak record, if you're out in Edmonton right now, Rod, like, how do you spin the positive when you talk about a cloud over the CFL? That's got to be a dark one, and can you see a positive there, or what is the baby step to a positive if you're an Elks fan or an observer?
Well, the complicating matters too, Dave, is, the situation with Chris Jones holding those jobs, and Victor Cui, the president of the club, has basically admitted their hands are tied in terms of, the coach management salary cap. And, if for those that want to see a change, that's not going to be coming. It's stunning, especially a Chris Jones team. I mean, he's had some bad teams before with Saskatchewan his first year there, and then managed to turn that around. But this is just a different story, and it's not like they don't have talent; they do, but it's ugly, and I don't know what kind of positive spin you put on it for this season right now. I mean, 0-7 in the West Division, and really, most I would think would be writing them off now, understandably, and without that win since 2019. I don't know what to say. I mean, I'm a pretty positive guy, but I don't know what you can say except focus on some individual talented players that they have that maybe they can build on in the future. But, already they're thinking ahead to next year.
It's a tough situation, to say the very least, and as you mapped out, no coaching change, so sometimes that can work, but it looks bleak. I want to get back to the quarterbacking, sort of the new quarterbacks in the CFL, and based on what you know from what you've asked people over the years, and some of these guys you work with, what do you think is the toughest thing for a young quarterback to learn about this league?
Well, I imagine coming up, I remember having conversations with Matt Dunnigan about this many times, who went through it in his first year in 1983 with Edmonton, when he got to learn from Warren Moon, he got to learn from Tom Wilkinson, and he would later have teammates like Tracy Ham and Damon Allen. I mean, it was just a different time and one of the greatest runs of quarterback talent in league history. But the obvious ones, the differences in the rules, and 12 defenders on the field, and differences in coverages and things like that, and the pace, the tempo of the game, with the with the game clock, and just a different style of game that it takes a quarterback a while. And he had said that too. I mean, just learning to get a feel for the game and read defenses up here, it does take time, and there aren't too many that could say that they could come in and just jump in and be immediately successful. I mean, to a certain degree, football's football, but they need the reps. They need to get in. They need to, probably to a certain degree, fail before they can succeed. And through unfortunate circumstances, the injuries that you've been talking about, Dustin Crum, we'll see what he has on Sunday in Calgary, if he can build on what he did, which was amazing in the second half against Winnipeg, or see what Taylor Powell can do. But it's an influx of young quarterback talent, or inexperienced CFL quarterback talent, the likes of which I haven't seen in a while. So see which way this goes. But I think it's the third time already this season we're having a quarterback start for the first time ever in the Canadian Football League.
There's got to be the speed of things. I mean, 2 downs for 10 yards. It's not like you have a down where you can figure out what's going on. You got to hit the ground running, the shorter play clock. I mean, it's just faster, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it's funny. I always thought, well, McLeod Bethel Thompson used to say, for anyone who would get down on the CFL, fans here don't realize what they have and how great this game is. And Doug Flutie used to say that too, and still widely regarded as the greatest ever to put on the pads in the Canadian Football League. And he loved the differences, and he used his skills to exploit them too, and was very innovative that way. But it's not for everyone. We've seen good quarterbacks come up from the U.S., some who'd even played in the NFL, and they just couldn't figure it out. And it is. It's football, but it is a different game, and and that's the toughest position for any football player to come north and to figure out quickly. That's for sure.
Well, you talked about it earlier, Rod, about how the sample size can be so small for some guys, right? Like the chances you get in pro football, forget the NFL, whether it's the CFL, any league, coaches have short patience and short leashes, right? And you don't get a forever dress rehearsal because there are no dress rehearsals. These are real games that count. But I wonder, when you're Taylor Powell for the Ticats tonight and they're down to their third string guy, does this almost force them to have a little more patience with a rookie?
Good question, because you got Kyle Oxley, who got let go from Edmonton, who struggled to get any reps at all, third in the depth with the Elks. And then you have Antonio Pipkin, who has some experience even starting in the league. He's been a bit of a journeyman most recently last year with BC, and they just brought him in to have a bit of a veteran presence, and he's the number 3 guy. But that's a good point. I think Taylor Powell, in this situation, taking on a 4-0 team, maybe the best team in the CFL right now, and I think that the reins tonight are going to be long. I'd be surprised if there was a change. I think they're going to give him a chance to see what he can build on from his experience in Edmonton coming off the bench and see what he can do. I mean, it's not like there is an experienced veteran quarterback that they just brought in. Pipkin does have some experience, but I wouldn't say, not extreme experience anyway. And he's used to situations like this. He's been largely a backup. I just can't see, you got a kid basically who's going to try to figure the game out. And as long as they feel that he's learning from his mistakes or starting to figure it out, I think regardless of the score, I would expect him to stay in the game.
Rod, thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate you cutting us in at a game night.
Thanks, Jimmer. Dave, good chat.
Thanks, Rod.
Rod Smith, CFL on TSN. Ticats and Argos live from Tim Hortons Field. You can watch it on TSN or listen right here on TSN 1050. Ben Grand and Mike Hogan will have the pregame show at 7 o'clock.
Intriguing. It's always fun to see a rookie, right? It's always fun to see a new guy try it out.
Well, yeah, because, it could work.
It could work, and you might just catch lightning in a bottle, and he could be great, right? And
some of these guys they can really sling the ball.
Yeah. This guy, he had a nice college career, played at a few different colleges down in the States, and clearly has talent. And maybe the idea that, hey, they got to leave him in there. They can't just yank him if he has a few stumbles out of the gate. They got to just keep going with him and hope that he figures it out quickly. But
it's just doing some math. Bo Levi Mitchell was that was week 2 against the Argonauts, 6-game list. So he's got they could always take him off earlier, but probably after next week.
Right.
He definitely comes off after that. But
so you got to give this guy 2 games.
Yeah. So well, depending on how it works out. If there's a problem, then you would probably, and it looks like he's all set to go, but you don't want a re-injury because the other backup or the regular was Schultz. He's on 6 games as well. So
right.
So this kind of has to work out in some fashion.
Right.
With Powell.
Right. So, but on the other hand, if he throws a couple of picks early, you got to maybe say, hey, take your time, get back out there, and learn from your mistakes.
Yeah, it's just like you're learning a new league, but you've got one less down. So that's a squeeze play, right? A mental squeeze play.
That's a big part of it.
Yeah, sure it is.
And look, they're going to have to. Yeah, it's nobody said it was easy, right? If it was easy, every decent mid-major NCAA quarterback would come up here and succeed, but it just doesn't happen that way very often, right?
No. So you said the FanDuel line was 9.5.
9.5 points.
I think it's a little generous, don't you?
Well, the Argos are the highest scoring team in the CFL.
I get it. But
Chad Kelly's been putting up some big numbers.
well, you can't argue with their offense. It's just slightly under 40 a game.
Yeah, and then the other thing is, like, with the quarterback problems the Ticats are having an unproven rookie under center, they're going to have to run the ball with Butler, right? And the Argos happen to be the best team on defending the run.
Look, I think the Argos are the full picture. They've got everything.
Which leads to a bookmaker probably saying, "Look, this looks like a 10-point game to me."
9 and a hay.
Yeah.
All right. Mail In Friday is brought to you by Boston Pizza. Weekends are better with fish bowls and frosty pints on the BP patio. Guy, grab your sunscreen. Let's have a weekend. See you on the BP patio. This is OverDrive on TSN 1050, streaming online, also available on the iHeartRadio app.
Now, back to OverDrive with Hayes, Noodles, and the O-Dog.
OverDrive, TSN 1050, streaming online, the iHeartRadio app, all that fun stuff. Jim Tatti, Dave Feschuk, final segment. And time now for the FanDuel Best Bets. Let's go to the Grappler. He's got all the information.
I'd like to think so. But before I get to these FanDuel Best Bets, I would like to just give a quick little mention to it's been a weird week on our show, as a lot of people have pointed out online, on Twitter, obviously on text. We have not been on TV all week. I am excited to let everyone know OverDrive will be back on TV to kick off the week on Monday. Your lives will return to normal. Dave, Jim, I'm sure that excites you quite a bit.
Well, we're not on TV today?
Why are you in here anyways?
Good question. What are we doing here?
Much easier for me, actually. Much easier not being on the tube. Go ahead.
Anyways, with that in mind, today's best bets are powered by FanDuel. Make your picks and assemble a same-game parlay in seconds on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. With today's best bets, we are going to look ahead to the Jays matchup versus the Mariners. Little same-game parlay action. I'm expecting Teoscar Hernandez to record a hit. Taking the under in strikeouts for Yusei Kikuchi, 5.5. I'm expecting Bo Bichette to record 2+ total bases, and I'm taking the Blue Jays on the money line. You can get that at plus 11.99. Today's best bets are powered by FanDuel. The first inning means as much as the ninth when you bet baseball on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Please play responsibly. Must be 18+ and physically located in Ontario.
So 90 seconds left. Dave and I, and you can join us, Grappler. We're going to do a range on the Samsonov arbitration ruling. And this is just our opinion. The ruling is not in. My range is low 3.8, high 4.2.
Whoa, you're going higher than I would.
Yeah.
The midpoint of their two offers is 3.65-ish.
Yeah.
I think Samsonov's got a little bit of a better case because there's comparables in the market that would bump that a bit. So I'm going to go 3.75.
Oh, real close to my 3.8.
But you had 4.2 as your high.
Well, I just I could see that. I mean,
it's an extra $500,000. It's not that big a deal.
No. How about you, Grappler?
Yeah, I think I said this before the show that I don't want to give him anything starting with a 4. So my range is, I guess, 3.6 to 3.9999999.
Okay, so we're talking high threes.
Okay.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's a 1-year deal. It'll be fine.
Which tells you that the 2.4 was grossly underestimating what could happen here.
You got to bid low if you want to get mid-range, right? So
apparently.
I mean, if they would, yeah. I think it was, look, it's hardball negotiations. It's a new era in Leafland. Kyle Dubas has left the building.
He has left the building, and we're about to do the same. I want to thank everybody for stopping by and wish everybody a happy and safe weekend.